now. Joining us for more on these matters is expert on regional affairs, Dr. Christopher Kayumba, who is also a former senior lecturer at the University of Rwanda, where he managed most of the courses in journalism, but also looking at safety in the region. And joining us via Skype from Kampala is veteran journo and founder of the Independent, Andrew M Mwenda. For more on this discussion, thank you very much for getting time, Dr. Kayumba.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you very much for getting time to speak to us, Andrew, there on Skype. Let me quickly jump to you on these matters. What don't we know yet about this impasse, and what do we need to know right now that is very critical?
I think that what I know, because I've been involved in this relationship before, is that there has been a reluctance on the part of Uganda to first discuss with Rwanda's concerns regarding allegations that Uganda is supporting Rwanda's enemies and arresting Rwandan citizens. The second source of the problem is that Uganda seems to have grievances which it seems reluctant or unwilling to bring onto the table to form bilateral discussions between it and Kigali. And this has placed Rwanda in a difficult situation where it does not know how to proceed, because one party is not willing to discuss both the complaints of Rwanda and her own grievances.
All right, Andrew, again, just allow me to bring Dr. Kayumba into this conversation as you're still there. Doctor, we understand that Rwanda filed some allegations across to Uganda saying that they've actively supported rebel groups that are opposing the Rwandan government, but also saying that there's been torturing and arresting of Rwandans on baseless charges. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think in order to understand what is happening, you have to understand the root cause of this problem, because as President Kagame explained on Saturday in his speech at the retreat, national retreat, he said this conflict goes far back more than 20 years. So it has a root cause, approximate cause, and what we can say sparks, like what Mwenda just mentioned. The issue, and what the president mentioned, the issue of Uganda funding Rwandan dissidents and rebel groups like P5 that was mentioned in the UN report, and FDLR, and also the issue of arresting and torturing Rwandese in Uganda that has also led Rwanda to ask Rwandese not to go there. And finally, the issue of economic sabotage have a background. And to me, because this is something that has been debated for the last 20 years, I think the root cause is President Kagame and his fellow leaders in Rwanda, both as sovereign individuals leading a sovereign state. Right. That is, I think, where the major issue is, because I don't think, if you look at what has been discussed so far, I don't think that Uganda, particularly President Museveni, has ever accepted that the RPF, President Kagame, are now leaders of a sovereign nation where he has no role except as a leader of a neighboring country, a friendly country.
Let me hold you to that and bring Andrew Mwenda back into this conversation. Andrew, we do understand that Museveni's silence is deafening, but also there is one thing as denying the allegations, which they have not done, and another thing as trying to find solutions, which is also not being brought to the table by the Ugandan government. Speak to me, both presidents not coming together and finding a solution, how much does this go deep down to have an impact on both the citizens that do business across the borders, but also the economy itself?
Well, I should tell you that if Rwanda is convinced that Uganda is supporting her enemies, Rwanda will certainly not sit idly and watch. That is one. The second thing is, the one thing that Rwanda will do is to seek to create dialogue with Uganda in the hope that Uganda can change her attitude towards what Rwanda is talking about. Please don't support our enemies. If Rwanda cannot change the attitude of Kampala, it will be forced to seek to change the circumstances in Kampala, in which case, if Rwanda feels Uganda is supporting her enemies, Rwanda will also support Uganda's enemies. And with time, Uganda will have the perfect evidence that Rwanda is also supporting her enemies. Now, I don't think that such a situation can continue indefinitely. It is likely to lead to a war between the two countries, because you see, silence creates ambiguity. Candor creates clarity. And I think that Uganda needs to create clarity in her relationship with Rwanda if any progresses take place. For as long as Uganda is not willing, A, to address Rwanda's concerns, B, place her own grievances on the discussion table, it will leave Rwanda to act in uncertainty. And you can see the recent actions of Rwanda are provocative. I don't know whether they are designed to draw Rwanda into a conflict, or I really don't know. The bottom line of what we can infer from the attitude of Uganda towards Rwanda is that Uganda does not want any discussion both of Rwanda's grievances and her own grievances.
Chris, bringing you back into this conversation, do you think President Paul Kagame fell into Museveni's trap? Because what we saw is that Uganda is not commenting on any of this. And President Kagame mentioned that he has met Museveni multiple times on this particular conversation. And also mentioned that at least they've met twice in Ethiopia to discuss this. And he left this in his hands to take charge or to find a solution for it because it's in his country. But as we see right now, we saw a response of closing the borders. So did Museveni just keep quiet also to provoke Kagame, and is he responding as he expected?
Me, I think that broadly, talking is better than silence. Right. When you keep silent, when the issue being brought about is an issue that relates to security, then that does not help the situation. Right. And I have a suspicion from the understanding of what is going on that the spark that led to Rwanda escalating and President Kagame explaining what the problem is, because for the first time in more than 20 years, President Kagame explained to Rwandese what the problem is. Right. I think there are three things. You understand that President Kagame has been the chair of AU for 1 year, and since 2016, the reform person at the AU. Right. I think during that period, a lot must have happened between what RNC and Kayumba Nyamasa's group in Uganda and in Congo, right, that has made Rwanda react the way it has, I suspect, because if you have also followed, you know that the spokesperson for FDLR was captured at the border with Congo, is even here, right, even the guy in charge of intelligence. So I don't think that Kagame, the way, because even now as we speak, President Uhuru Kenyatta is here. Last week on Thursday, President Kagame was in Tanzania, and I am reliably informed that he explained this situation. Therefore, I think
back to this conversation and ask you: is someone being sidelined here? Is Uganda being sidelined? Because President Kagame was in Tanzania just last week, as you mentioned, and we've seen President Uhuru Kenyatta coming to Kigali, and he mentioned something very critical in his speech today, which definitely you will come back to. But is someone being sidelined?
I wouldn't say that the Ugandan president is being sidelined. I would say that Rwanda has taken a proactive approach to this conflict and is explaining first to Rwandese, because President Kagame himself, as I said, explained these things. Right. It is in the media, and therefore it is something that East Africans now understand, and broadly the world. And now the leaders are also brought on board. And I don't think Kagame would have done this if he thought that the problem is not as bad as he thinks. I suspect that the support being given to rebel groups led by Kayumba, I think this is where the biggest problem is.
Okay, let me bring Andrew back into this conversation. Andrew, President Kagame, as he was kicking off the National Leadership Retreat on Saturday, and also President Museveni on Friday on the Women's Day, they made some critical speeches there. President Kagame saying that no one can bring me to my knees, and also President Museveni saying that no one can destabilize Uganda. What do you make of this as someone that has actually been very, very close to both leaders?
Well, it tells you that both of them are sounding the drums of war. I think that there must be considerations that Uganda has which we do not know and can only speculate. It is possible that perhaps Uganda sees in the rise of Rwanda a threat, and it is unlikely to put this issue on the table openly for discussion. And that may explain Kampala's silence. Because I hear in Kampala, people in rumors saying that Rwanda is seeking regime change. The government of Rwanda wants to assassinate Museveni. They accuse Rwanda of so many things. And I have been interested to know whether Uganda has made a formal or informal complaint or protest to Rwanda. And I know for 100% that Uganda has never complained to Rwanda about these factors. And I wonder why, if Uganda has these as legitimate grievances, it does not present them to the government of Rwanda so that they can discuss and find a solution. On the other hand, Rwanda has been very frank with her grievances. It has said Uganda has been involved in has taken decisions that undermine Rwanda's economy, that Uganda is supporting Rwanda's enemies, and that Uganda is seeking regime change. If I were in charge of policy in Uganda, the first thing I would do is to say, okay, both of us feel aggrieved, let us come to the table. But all efforts to begin a conversation have been frustrated. I don't think that Uganda is interested in a discussion, and that leads me to conclude that maybe Uganda's actions are simply provocative. They are acting like this to induce Rwanda to act, and in the reactions of Rwanda, they hope to find a space or an opportunity, a weakness that they can exploit. I don't know. Now you can clearly see I am speculating, Andrew, because when a person is silent, I told you, silence creates ambiguity. Candor creates clarity. And there's no clarity on this matter. So we can only speculate. What are Kampala's intentions? We can only speculate.
Andrew, should be worried right now that maybe this war of words and just a little bit of throwing one word to another could turn into something serious. Should we be worried?
Certainly. By the way, I think that Uganda and Rwanda are going to fight. It will be almost impossible for them not to fight. Militarily and across a common border. Why do I think war is? You see, remember that the wars can happen even when leaders are committed to avoiding them. Once any country puts its military on alert, then miscalculations and misunderstandings can escalate a situation to a level where either side finds it more honorable to fight and be seen to be strong than to step down and be seen to be a coward or weak. I should tell you that in my study of the different wars that have taken place in the world, take the First World War, take the Second World War, you can take perhaps the most famous war, the war between Athens and Sparta in 431 BC. The one consistent thing is that war, as Clausewitz, the great German military theorist, war is a realm of uncertainty. A series of actions and misactions can escalate a situation beyond any leader's original intent. At a particular point, by the way, it may not matter what Museveni wishes and what Kagame wishes. Events may drive both of them to a situation where they find fighting a war is more honorable than withdrawing and looking and suffering a humiliating step down. So if they cannot de-escalate this situation now, the possibility that there will be war is very high.
Right. Chris, do you think there could be, or do you necessarily concur with Andrew there saying that there could be a war? I mean, do you see that this Cold War could in any way distract President Kagame from his focus on developing Rwanda and also the maintaining of his leadership legacy?
In the bigger picture, taking the bigger picture, the longer view, I don't think there will be a war. Right. Between Rwanda and Uganda, because... So
you don't concur with that?
Yes, but this needs an explanation.
Right.
Because what is at stake is too much. Right. If you look at, as Mwenda explains, Uganda has not substantively said there is a national interest that this conflict advances. Even Museveni himself said there is no fundamental problem. And Rwanda and Uganda have no interest at all in fighting a war. And both countries would lose a lot if they went to war.
Is this because both countries have seen a war, at least in the past 30 years?
Of course, these two countries have experienced war, and both men have led men in war, right. So they have the cost of war. But also, if they went to war, the broader East African community and the East African project would be jeopardized. So right. I think the approach President Kagame has taken of calling regional leaders and explaining what is happening, right. Preparing Rwandese, shows that he wants this conflict to be resolved. Remember, Uganda has not even said, because if you remember when they fall out in 2009, 1999, 2000, when they fell out, each of these two states were supporting each other's enemies. You remember some Ugandan dissidents were here.
Right.
But this time around, this has not come out. So I think that there is a likelihood that this problem will be resolved through peace talks. But if it doesn't, if President Museveni remains silent, and Rwanda thinks that probably its security is threatened because it involves supporting rebel groups, P5 that is led by somebody who was the chief of staff here, that is taken seriously here. But I don't think that this will escalate to the level of a war because of what is at stake.